Thanks everyone for joining us today. Today, John Dempsey is going to go over inventory reporting. Take it away, John.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, whether you're watching it now or watching it later at home, at your convenience. So I was asked to do a web training session today on inventory reporting, which is kind of a wide open topic. And I've done some of these sessions in the past, both at the RCS hosted events and online. And I wanted to kind of take this particular session with a fresh approach. And so as I started thinking about things and looking at what I wanted to present, and looking at Counterpoint, Counterpoint provides 267 reports when you install the package. Of those 267 reports, 90 of them are inventory reports. And that's an awful lot of inventory reports. And I'm not going to spend the next hour going through 90 inventory reports and explain the pros and cons and the differences between them. I'm actually going to take the exact opposite tact, and that is using one report for most of your inventory reporting needs, kind of a one-stop shopping approach, and then using other reports potentially for further drill down and further analysis, but really a macro to micro approach of inventory reporting using a single report. And the report I'm going to focus today on is one that I think is a little overlooked. I think most people tend to look at the merchandise analysis, which is a personal favorite, but the retail value report is really based on the same coding and same programming that the merchandise analysis is using, but it's got a canned output format. And what I mean by that is a couple different things. One, it gives more columns of data than the merchandise analysis, which makes it a little bit more useful. And two, the reason we run reports in Counterpoint or in anything is to find out information. We should be having goals other than cutting down trees for paper. And so when we start looking at reports, we should have a reason for the report itself. And so what are our goals for our reports, and what are we looking to accomplish with these reports? And so some of the things you might be looking to accomplish or find out are, what is my stock status? How much inventory do I have? That's sort of a micro goal for individual items. But you might also want to know per store, per category, per vendor, per subcategory, how much inventory do I have? How much of that inventory is old versus how much of that inventory is new? What are my sales for groups of inventory or individual items? What are my best performing items? What are my worst performing items? What makes something a best performing item, and what makes something a least performing item? And I can do pretty much all of those things with this retail value report. And so to kind of look at the way the report operates, the first thing we get to determine when we run the report, whether this is a group or summary report, and that's the first pass we'll play with, or an individual item detail report. So if I choose to group my data, I can group it by category or subcategory or vendor, or by profile codes or attribute codes. And for a quick summary, I'm going to do this by category. And so in most cases, when I train new customers, I usually suggest best practices of keeping your category tree or structure to about 10 to 12 categories. That makes most of these summary reports a 1 or 2 page report, which you can skim through pretty quick and easily and really get the gist of how the business is performing and what your inventory levels are. When I'm doing a category summary, I want to see all of my categories right off the bat. And then one of the important things that I mentioned a minute ago, best performance or least performing items, we can choose how we're going to rank our inventory. So we can look for our best categories or our worst categories, or our best items or our worst items. So I might group by sales. I might group by discounts or markdowns. I might group based on my retail ending balance. which sector of my business do I have the most product in right now? For right now, let's do this by sales. And I'm going to run this for the current month. I can order by category or I can order by rank. So if I order by rank, that'll essentially put my top selling category on the top. I can run this for all of my locations into a merged summary, which is what I'm going to do my first pass through. I can run this for groups of locations. So if I have East Coast stores and West Coast stores, I can run those separately, or I can run it for a single location. And I usually like to print cost and print units. And this is one of the nice things about the retail value report versus the merchandise analysis report. What it's going to give us is activity in retail dollars, activity in cost dollars, and activity in quantity. So for everything it outputs, it's going to give us 3 components of information, where the merchandise analysis, you're really limited to 7 to 10 columns of data. This is going to give us a lot more in a fairly readable format. And in this particular case, my first pass through, I'm not going to include location detail. We'll come back and take a look at that in a minute. But I am going to include inactive inventory. I want to pause and talk about this a little bit. When we look at the report, it'll be pretty obvious what we're talking about here. But inactive inventory means the item did not have any sales, receiving, adjustment, transfer, transactional history during the period of December 1st through December 10th. This is not referring to items that are marked inactive. And that kind of throws people a little bit. And the reason I want to include inactive inventory is I may have started December with some of that product, but I haven't received any more, I haven't sold any more, I haven't done anything with the product, but I still want that included in my totals because I want to know how much inventory I have on hand right now. And if I don't include inventory that hasn't moved during the period, which is only 10 days worth of activity, I'm missing a chunk of my inventory in my reporting. And if I'm trying to reconcile this against any other report, that's really important that I see that information. So the report itself is broken down by category. And within my categories, I have what I have on hand, had on hand on December 1st. So this is a historical valuation number, and it's giving it to me in retail dollars, in cost dollars, and in quantity. Reading across, I started with $256,000. Let me increase the size here so you can see it. So I started with $256,000 worth of inventory in my golf category. I received an additional $17,000. I've done adjustments of $1,074. I haven't transferred any inventory between stores, but I've taken $10,000 worth of inventory out in sales. And this is sales in retail dollars, which means this is everything that's sold, assuming it's sold at full price or at price 1. If you had a promotion going on or you did price overrides, those would be reflected in the discounts column. So from here, we can see how much we would have collected if we'd sold everything at full price, and what we've actually collected is really $7,400 in sales. We've also taken an additional $7,497 worth of markdowns. So this would be a price sheet where we where we repriced our product, or we actually called up individual items and changed the price. When we do that, Counterpoint records that as a markdown transaction. That doesn't affect the cost or quantity of what we have on hand, but it does affect the retail balance of our inventory. So beginning inventory plus receivings, less adjustments and transfers, less sales, less discounts and markdowns are going to give us our ending inventory. And so that's 7 columns worth or 8 columns worth of information, where the merchandise analysis report really only shows us 7 without wrapping to a second line, and on a second line, we really only get to see 10 columns worth of information. Here, 20 pieces of information because we're not seeing discounts and markdowns. So it's providing us a lot more information than the merchandise analysis report does. And it's doing it in retail and cost terms. So from here, I can see pretty quickly of my $270,000 worth of inventory, $256,000 of it's stale. It's older inventory. It's from November or earlier. I've received more inventory in the last 10 days than I've sold, which may be good as I'm heading towards Christmas and I anticipate sales going up in the next 2 weeks. But come January, I might be frightened by that trajectory. I can also see I've done a lot of adjustments, and I might want to look into that. Did I do a physical inventory preparing for the holiday season, or did we have a big write-down of inventory? So this kind of gives me a quick executive summary of all of the activity that's happened in the business for the period. And I can run this for the month, for a quarter, for the year to date. I can run it for whatever period I want. And I might want to run this for last December to get some comparison information. And since it's a one-page report, printing out 2 one-page reports and looking at them side by side is not too difficult to do. So from here, I might want to see, well, how does this golf inventory break down further, either by location or by subcategories? So if I close out of this, I'm going to show location detail and rerun that report. And we're going to see the same information, but for all of our locations. And then each category is going to give us our totals. So now I can see where the sales are occurring and what locations have inventory that I might want to pull from. Nothing's been selling at the East store and they're sitting on $68,000 worth of product. I can start pulling that and sending it to my main store where product actually seems to be moving. One thing I also want to point out here is there's a little asterisk next to the golf. You notice that it does not appear next to the apparel. And that asterisk up here indicates that this category includes non-inventory items. And the reason for this warning is that you can receive on a purchase order non-inventory items, which does create some transactional history, but you can't adjust non-inventory items. And when you sell non-inventory items, there's no cost associated with them, and there's no quantity associated from a transactional standpoint, which means adding across the row is going to be off by your non-inventory items. So they put that warning in there as a caveat. But this gives us a really quick executive summary of where the inventory is and how it's getting from where it started to where it is currently. And if I decide I want to run that for a specific location, I can just toggle it to my main site. Essentially, the parameter screen works almost identical to that of the merchandise analysis. The big difference is that we do not have a select columns because the columns are already pre-laid out for us. And notice the sales column itself is shaded. That indicates that it's the ranking column. If I decide to rank my inventory or my categories by my ending inventory, I can do that in cost dollars, I can do that in quantity, or I can do that in retail dollars. It's still probably going to wind up putting my golf category on top, but notice the ending category is shaded here instead of the sales category. So just by looking at it, I can see what's making it the best category or the worst category. So if I want to drill down and look at my golf at location Maine and see how that $198,000 worth of inventory is broken down, I can run this instead of by category, I can run it by subcategory. And I might filter out my food and my apparel just to make the report a little bit more manageable. So I might filter just for the specific golf category. clubs and accessories and golf balls and fees and miscellaneous, and I can see how the sales are broken down. And again, I'm still going to get the category total at the bottom. If you don't organize your structure by category and subcategory, if you want to see that by vendor, you could. Or using profile codes or attribute codes. So if you have men's versus women set up as a profile or as an attribute, you might want to see it that way. Once I've kind of looked at the inventory in groups, I might want to see it based on an individual item basis. And so if I want to drill this down into really the finite detail, I'm going to run this report by item. And first time through, I'm going to run it for all of my items. And maybe when I'm looking at items, I want to know what my best sellers are. And so I might do that in quantity sold. And I'm just going to run this for all of my items, again, for the month to date, and just for the location Maine. And so my quantity sold is shaded down here. So the men's shorts are my top selling item for the last 10 days. If I wanted to cut that down for the category of golf, I could just apply an item filter like I did a moment ago. And again, I can see page by page, and on your inventory, I'm on a small demo database with maybe 100 items. It's only 9 pages, but on yours, this could be hundreds of pages. So perhaps you don't really want to see, items that are small sellers that are really irrelevant. What you really are looking for are your best selling items and your worst selling items. And so to do that, you can look at your top 10 items or top 20 items. And that's going to cut the report from 9 pages down to 2 pages. And again, that's based on the quantity sold because that's what I selected as my ranking column. If I had done that by sales, it would have retail sales. This one might have been on top. But it's kind of merging in apparel and golf items, and it's just slapping them all together. And what I really would like to know is what are my best selling items in each of my subsets of inventory? So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to still analyze by item, and I'm going to print all of my items. But I'm going to group my items by category. And then within the categories, I'm only going to print the top 5. Well, let's do top 5. Keep it short. And I'll order by rank. And in this case, let's rank it by sales. So now I'm getting it grouped by my apparel category, and further down I'm going to have food, and further down still I'm going to have golf. And within each one of these categories, I'm getting the top 5 items per category. My forecast category is a really small category. I only have a few items in there, so it's not going to give me 5 in that one. Again, my top 5 apparel items, my top 5 food items, my top 5 golf items. And the last page, I'm still going to get totals. I'm also going to get totals per category. That totals per category is just the total of those top five items. So I can use this pretty quickly to find what are my best items per group, and then I can do what are my worst items per group. And so What makes something a worst item per group? Maybe the item I'm sitting on the most of. So I might change it from ranking by sales to my retail ending balance or my cost ending balance. And if I'm looking for things that I'm sitting on a lot of, I want to look for the top 5 items based on the retail ending balance. If I don't have something, I'm not really concerned with it. If I'm sitting, tying up my inventory dollars on something that's not moving, I am concerned about it. So here I'm sitting on $12,000 worth of golf shoes as we're going into winter, and people probably aren't going to be playing golf up here. A few other things that are on this report. When you're running in an item detail report, it does add a few additional columns: who the vendor is, what the current selling price is, what the markup percentage is. And notice there's a regular price and a markup percentage here again. So if an item has, and so the reason we have 2 markup percentages is one is based on price 1 and the other is based on regular price. So we can look at what the markup percentage should be based on like a suggested retail price versus what our markup percentage is, and see if we're in line with vendor suggested pricing or not, or if we're in line with what we want to make for margin within a particular category. So looking at these shorts, that's a little bit lower than my men's pants. So maybe I need to increase the selling price of the shorts or decrease the selling price of the pants. So in terms of one report that's going to provide really what I think is the most information, I think this really does beat the merchandise analysis report. And once you're using this, you can go back and forth between this and the merchandise analysis report to look at some of this information alongside of things like turn rates or sell-through percentages, or gross margin return on investment. And if you're used to the retail inventory value report, the merchandise analysis report is very, very similar. It's just the same kind of layout where you're able to pick and choose what columns of detail you want to see. But in terms of ranking and grouping data, both of them work identically. Some other things that apply with this report are the same standard functionality that applies with all of the counterpoint reports, where you can filter based on things in the item and inventory table. And so some things that you might want to filter on the inventory table, maybe you want to exclude things where you're out of stock. So again, just like every standard counterpoint report, if I right click, I can customize and build a filter. So I can build my conditions. And so some interesting conditions that I like to use when I'm running reports. I might want to look at things that I don't have any more of, but I've sold recently. So that means I've sold out of a product in recent time frame, and I might want to replace that product because it's got a proven track record of selling in the current season. So I might add a condition based on quantity on hand. Drag this over for my other monitor. And I could do quantity available or quantity on hand, essentially the same thing. So, or maybe I want to do quantity available in this particular instance, because if I've got some committed to orders or layaways, I don't want to include those in my existing inventory. So quantity available is less than or equal . Just going to be at most. And I'm going to add another condition based on the last sale date. And this is going to give me some kind of an information as to how fresh sales activity is. So the last sale date is on or after . If I right click, I can simplify that so it's a little bit easier to read. So the quantity available is at most 0, because I want to include anything that shows a negative on hand. Anytime I see a negative on hand, usually indicates there's probably more product on the shelf that I'm not telling people over the phone or on my website that I have. So I might be losing product sales. So anytime I'm below 0 on a product, I want to know about it. And last sale date is on or after. Let's go with somewhere around Thanksgiving. And let's see if I sold through on anything recently. Yeah, we did. Okay. So here, my hat is showing I've got -1, and I bet I have some hats on the shelf that I have to go and check on and maybe do some inventory adjustments. That's not too many items, which isn't bad, but it's showing that it's pulling my inventory down by retail and cost dollars with a -1 on hand. And if I have negative inventories on hand when I sell this, I'm going to wind up hitting my cost correction account. So your accountant's going to ask at the end of the year, what are all these cost correction entries? Well, that's caused by selling this hat to the -1 or -2 or -3. So anytime I can correct that with inventory adjustments, that prevents additional entries to the cost correction account. We're also going to hit that same cost correction account when we receive more of these hats to kind of dig us out of the hole we've created in that cost correction account. So that's something I certainly want to fix. But if I truly am out of stock on these hats and I've sold it recently, well, chances are I might want to order more of them because that's something that people are buying. Another little inventory filter that I kind of like is if you're using mins and maxes, I can build a condition based on where I am in relationship to my mins and maxes. So in the list of columns in the inventory table, and this is accessible on any report that has an inventory tab, there are 3 fields: stock status. And that stock status can be based on the quantity available, the quantity on hand, or the net quantity, which is quantity on PO and quantity on transfer in and quantity on hand. So it's kind of giving you an inflated quantity figure based on, pending transactions. But I'll do this based on quantity on hand. And so if I simplify that, now I can build a condition for inventory where I'm overstocked or understocked. Okay means I'm between my mins and maxes. Out of stock means I don't have any. So if I want to look at things that I'm overstocked, here's inventory that I've got lots of inventory, more than I really ever intended. It's $120,000 worth of inventory that I've overbought. Conversely, if I do that for understocked, this will give me an idea of what I need to go out and buy. And we always need more beer. I didn't plan for that to happen. It just always does.
Sure you didn't.
I really didn't. It's just the magic. I may also decide I want to exclude items from the report. So if I know that certain vendors will not fulfill my order by Christmas, and I don't want to include that in the mix because I don't want to be trying to order product from those vendors, I might build filters based on the primary vendor is not exactly, and exclude Patagonia or exclude whoever I want to exclude because I know I can't find that vendor anymore, or at least not in the time frame that I need. Or other ways of thinking of my inventory, I might do it based on price points. So I might look at inventory based on price ranges. Lots of people go shopping and say, I'm looking for a gift under $50. So I might do a condition based on the price range. Maybe you're a bigger spender. Maybe we're looking for something between $50 and $100. We can get pretty flexible and pretty creative with our filters to kind of identify products that we have in different ranges for people. I'm kind of a big fan of using profile and attributes for a lot of these functions. If you're a ski retailer, you may have a good, better, best model of ski within a vendor. So if you're buying skis from Fisher, you might have a touring ski, you might have a junior classical race ski, you might have an adult classical race ski, and then the same thing on the skating side. So you might have 5 or more different skis from Fisher in a cross-country ski. And so grading the ski as, you know, junior performance, adult performance, or touring allows you to cut these down by attributes or profiles. And so you can use either attribute fields or profile fields to kind of classify the item, what kind of an item it is, where it falls. And then you can use that as a reporting filter to cut down a 400-page report into a 3 or 4-page report that you can scan through pretty quickly and decide that a product is moving. So for example, maybe the junior performance skis aren't moving. People are spending more money for the adult performance ski because it's a, you know, the race stock ski. It's the what they see people on the World Cup using, and that's what they want. So they'll spend the extra $100 on a pair of skis. There's not that much difference in the cost of a Nordic ski. And you can recycle some of these attribute fields. So for example, you might have an attribute 3 graded as good, better, best, or men's and women's, or performance, or recreational. So you can have multiple codes, only one of them assigned to attribute 3 per item, but you can use that for further filtering data on the report, getting that report down to a manageable list. I see lots and lots of cases where people print out huge reports and they're really only ever looking at the first and last page. They don't look at the 398 pages in the middle. So wouldn't it make sense to use the field so you can actually print out the information that you're actually going to look at? So once I've kind of used the retail value report to kind of start from a macro level and work down to a micro level as to what inventory I have, what's moving, what's not moving, I might do further analysis using the merchandise analysis. But based on what I've seen on the retail value report, I might filter the merchandise analysis down to the individual item or subset of items that I really care about. And here I might use different columns to further quantify whether an item is a good item or a bad item in terms of turn rates or return on investment. So you'll notice that the merchandise analysis parameter screen is very similar to the retail value parameter screen, where I can group by item or run it by group. I can choose what my ranking method is. And here, this behaves a little bit differently. We'll come back and talk about that in a second. So if I want to run this for all of my items and I want to group by category, and I want to look at my top 5 items per category for the month to date, and let's do for all locations, that's fine. I'm still going to include inactive inventory. that function works the same as it did on the retail value report. And fine. And so the merchandise analysis allows me to pick and choose what columns of data I want to look at. And just, I want to start over, so I'll clear out the ones they've pre-selected for me because that's not what I want to look at. And then the big thing I like to point out, a lot of people look over this, but there's a show all columns list. And you'll notice the default list is a lot smaller than it will be once I check that box. Once I check that box, I have a much larger list of columns I can choose. So I can basically rebuild the retail value report here if I had enough columns to, because I can only get 10 columns on the report. But there's a cost beginning balance, a cost ending balance, cost of adjustments, cost of receivings, cost of returns, cost of sales, cost on hand. Same thing for the quantity figures, cost beginning balance, cost ending balance, quantity on hand, and retail dollars. So retail on PO, retail on transfer. So what I might build comparable to the retail value report, I might build some of those same numbers using all retail terms. So what I mean by that is I want to know my retail beginning balance. I want to know what I've received, what I've sold. And this is one I can't get on the retail value report that I'm interested in, and that's the retail on purchase orders. And let's also put in the retail on hand if I haven't already. And you'll notice there's a retail on hand and a retail ending balance. And the difference between the two of these is the retail on hand is what's on hand right now in retail dollars. The retail ending balance is what's on hand as of this date. So if I make this December 8th, this is going to be what was on hand December 8th. This is what was on hand December 1st. And this is what's on hand today. These are kind of duplicating each other, so I'll throw one of them out to give myself some more room. And so I've got my beginning plus receivings, and maybe I'm going to put my on purchase orders up next to the receivings because those hopefully will be coming in soon. What's on what we've sold and what we're left with. And I'm not going to concern myself with adjustments or transfers, but maybe I do want some other information like gross profit percentages or gross margin return on investments or sell-through percentage if I'm comparing my receivings versus sales. So let's put in a profit percentage, and that puts us at 6 columns. I can add one more, and I will do a sell-through percent. Some of these formulas, the sell-through percent, the gross margin return on investment, and the turn rates, regardless of what I specify for a period here, looks at the last 365 days of activity to compute the average inventory required for those columns. So my sales is based on the last 10 days, but gross margin return on investment or anything that involves an average inventory is going back a full year to calculate average inventory and sales during that period. And so since I've added up to 8 columns, this report becomes a lot harder to read because it wraps onto a second line. So if you can run this report with 6 or fewer columns, it's a lot easier to read. And again, I've got my starting inventory plus what I've brought in, plus what's coming in, what I've sold, and what I'm left with. And the last thing I want to show you guys is a little trick for advanced users. And to do this, you need access to a SQL utility, whether it's SQL Studio Express or the SQL script utility that Counterpoint installs. You need the ability to run a query against the database. And so we'll just set up this report kind of similar to what we've been running so far. So here's my report that we've been kind of looking at all along. I've got location detail. My report's broken down by category. And one of the common requests lots of people ask is, when I export this to Excel, Excel does all kinds of formatting to it, and it's kind of hard to read. And it is. It'll put blank lines in between things based on group totals. It'll do lots of different, the formatting might be based on column headings, and then where the group headings don't align with the column headings, it does some funky behavior when it gets into Excel. And people want to be able to kind of do this cleaner. And one of the ways you can do things like this is if I click on Options and I show the SQL tabs, if I click on the All SQL text, it kind of shows the database query that's going to happen. I have to hit the refresh button so it applies anything I've done in filters. But if I look at this SQL text, it's got the whole select statement, including my date ranges and all kinds of other stuff. And so if I copy this, and I open up a SQL tool, I've got Studio Express open over here, and I paste that in, I'm going to get the results of that SQL query, including my column headings. And so from SQL here, I can select all, I can copy with headers, and I can open up an Excel spreadsheet. And I can paste that in. So I can move data from the SQL query into Excel. And to do that, there's a couple little tricks that are specific to either the merchandise analysis report or this retail value report. So if I open up the report, because this is kind of a complex report, it uses work tables. We actually have to load the data into the work table before we're able to pull off that trick. And the way I do that is just set the report up the way I want to run it, hit the preview, and as it's initializing the report and calculating the data, it's actually copying that information into the work tables, and then the report is based on the data that's in the work table. So I actually have to execute it to get the data into the work table, and then I'm able to go to that Options, show SQL tabs, and what it really is requiring is this big long session ID. So if I'm using this report and you're using this report and somebody else is using this report, every one of us is generating our own session ID, and that kind of keeps my data out of the way of your data and vice versa. So I just want to see the data that pertains to my session ID. And this is calculated when I open the screen. And so when I preview the report, I'm loading the data into the work tables with that session ID. And now if I copy this and go back to SQL and execute it, I'm going to get the data I was looking for. And I'm not going to see your data because I'm just seeing my session ID's worth of information. I've used that a couple different times for people that really need to get that data into Excel, and the formatting on it is just too difficult. there any questions on what we've covered so far today?
I think we're good. Covered a
Okay.
lot.
Well, thank you all for attending. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Every time I play around with these, I kind of find new tricks and tools and things that I can apply to other reports. So the more you use this, the more you'll find the knowledge kind of transforms over to other aspects of the software. Thanks for coming, and see you in the next webinar.